Hi, I'm John Fletcher. I'm a member at University United Methodist Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is the midweek devotional for August 5th. How are you doing? I mean, really, how are you doing? That's such a Methodist question to ask, except we tended to put it like, how goes it with your soul? Which is kind of a shockingly intimate question, right? It's kind of like when you have a good friend who asks you, how you doing? And you give the standard answer that you give, and then the friend says, no, look, listen who you're talking to. Really, how are you doing? And you know that both you can answer honestly and that you'd better answer honestly because it's your friend and they know. How am I doing? Well, so this last Sunday, if you watched the recorded service, you may have seen my little children's moment, which I filmed a couple of weeks ago. In that moment, I used this thing, a strum stick. It's kind of a dumb person's guitar, to illustrate what it's like to be part of a community. I said, to be part of a community, we're all each like one of these little strings, and we play in harmony with each other. And then sometimes, though, and I got one of them out of tune. And I said, sometimes I feel a bit like this string. It's a little bit out of tune. What do I do? And then I was going to show how I could use the other strings to get me back into tune with them. And just as I was retuning this string that was supposed to stand for me, I heard plonk, and the string broke. The string that was representing me broke. Now, this caused a lot of laughter from Sherry Lee and Bob Courtney, who were watching and filming. It was kind of, I have to say, a perfect illustration of how I felt at the time. And I went back and I did a slightly different lesson with just my two-string little strum stick. But man, I've kept this broken string. It stays with me. I'm trying not to take it as too much of a personal omen or a sign. It's just a broken string, right? But that said, it's been interesting to me just how busy I have been even while staying mainly at home and ostensibly not doing as much as I usually do. It's been amazing to me how anxious I have been. I'm not out engaged with lots of things, but just sitting at home and filtering the world through the most alarming and scary stories I can find, the most stressful emergency meetings that I'm called to. There's a name for this that we've created, right? Called doom scrolling. Doom scrolling that is obsessively going from depressing and anxiety provoking end of the world story to another depressing and anxiety provoking end of the world story. And you know what? I get that. Sometimes, you know what? Life is like that. It is 2020. There are a lot of big things going on. And we are not called as Christians to believe that the world is this Pollyanna, everything is wonderful sort of fairy tale, right? In fact, we have an invitation and command from our Lord to share in and listen to the suffering of those who are crying out now. There's a lot of suffering that has been going on for a long time, a lot of anxiety that people have been shouting about, crying about, shaking us to get us to hear, and we've not heard until this summer, a lot of us. I know there's a lot of new suffering that it's new to me because I'm hearing it for the first time. And we're called to listen to that. We're called to lock into it. We're called to be a source of comfort. In fact, there's a whole name for it. It's a Wesleyan means of grace. That is a means of grace, what John Wesley talked about as one of the ways that we as Christians access and to participate in the loving care that God has for us and for the world. And there are works of piety, such as, praying, studying the Bible, worship, and there are works of mercy, like helping the poor, visiting those in prison, feeding the hungry, and sometimes just hearing and seeing the witness of those who are saying, there is some stuff going on. I need you to recognize it and get as concerned about it as I am. Sometimes that can be a means of grace. But we can't always just stay there, right? Another means of grace that Wesley says is fasting. Fasting. That's not something you usually hear talked about in Methodist churches. That's not something we usually do. We don't usually fast, right? We kind of see, or rather, I see sort of fasting as a bit of a chore, right? Something that maybe hermits or monks do, like where they become very thin and they fast and such like that. But I have to say, when I think about fasting nowadays, I kind of wonder if there isn't a bit of freedom to it. James Bryant Smith in the book The Good and Beautiful Community, he invites us to consider ways that we might take a fast, not necessarily from food, but from things that compel and command our attention. Things that compel and command our attention sometimes away from God or away from each other. For me, I wonder if taking a kind of fast might mean taking a fast from news, from screens. And it's not forever. Fasts are finite, but then fasts are also freeing. They can be these times and places where we close the blast doors on the attention economy just for a little bit. It's a place where maybe we find ourselves. In the Bible, we often see prophets, we even see Jesus going out into the wilderness, away from everyone else, away from the synagogue, away from the holy texts. They're not doing anything except existing in the wilderness, usually without a lot of food. Now, I used to think that this was, some kind of holy suffering that they take on themselves to sort of wear themselves down. But then when I look again at scripture, sometimes I see that Jesus gets away from it all because he's tired of it all, because he's weary of it all, because he needs just a little space to find some space of quiet, some margin between him and the needs of the world. Kind of reminds me, there's a song in The Faith We Sing, that's our little tiny Methodist hymnal. Remember those times when we got to gather together and have hymnals? Well, that little one, it's called Come and Find the Quiet Center. I won't sing this time, but I'll just read to you the first two verses. They work well as poetry. Come and find the quiet center in this crowded life we lead. Find the room for hope to enter. Find the frame where we are freed. Clear the chaos and the clutter. Clear our eyes that we can see all the things that really matter. Be at peace and simply be. The next verse. Silence is a friend who claims us, cools the heat, and slows the pace. God it is who speaks and names us, knows our being, touches base, making space within our thinking, lifting shades to show the sun, raising courage when we're shrinking, finding scope for faith begun. So instead of where are you, let me leave you with instead of how are you, let me leave you with the question, where are you? Where are you right now? Are you relatively tuned and in tune? Are you a string in good tune? Are you ready to maybe be someone who listens to and resonates with the cries of a broken world? Or maybe you're a string out of tune who needs to connect with other people, other friends of the faith, sort of get back into tune. Or are you, like I was, are you that broken string in need of some quiet so that you can stop and maybe restring yourself? And I would ask you, consider a fast from something in your life that claims your attention and worry. That might be screens, it might be calls, it might be emails, it might be the internet altogether. I would say start small and manageable. Maybe all you can do, I can be away from my email. I think I can be away from it 1 hour that I would usually otherwise be on it. Maybe it's 8 hours. Maybe it's a day. Maybe it's a weekend or a week. We have silent retreats. What if you did a silent staycation and sort of shut down, just kind of let everyone know, you know what, I am not going to be reachable for the next day or two, right? You'll see that most often the world is going to go on without you, which can be very comforting. It can also be a little like, what? You mean the world is going on without me? Sometimes I get a little threatened by that. But you know what? In those times and spaces of fasting and rest, I bet I can grapple with those feelings just a bit better. It's always a good idea, there's no rules for this kind of fasting. I would say it's always a good idea to surround it with prayer. Start it with a prayer, end it with a prayer. Doesn't need anything fancy. Just say, Lord, I'm opening myself up. Speak to me as you will. And notice that God might speak to you, and God might just give you some blessed silence. We talk about the still small voice that God uses. Another translation of that is the sound of sheer silence. That silence as well as noise belongs to God. That the Spirit of God exists in silence, just as in the midst of noise, cacophony, music. I would also say, if you can, spend some part of your fast in nature. Connect with something that isn't just your house. It might be that all you can do is look out a window and try and see a bit of sky, try and see an animal. That can work. If you can, try to step outside. Breathe in some fresh air. Look at the sky. See if you can look at the sky at different times of day or night. If you can, even get completely out. Walk around a lake. Get out into a place where you're surrounded by trees or green things. And then just be still and listen. God speaks through nature in ways that we don't often see. We can be good at reading the Bible. We are, as Methodists, the people of one book. But recognize that God writes in nature, writes in bird song, speaks to us through wind, paints to us through the colors of trees and flowers. Nature can sometimes give us a great sense of perspective, to remind us of that wonderful lesson that while we are never alone, it's also not about us. Something is bigger than us. But whatever you do on your fast, whether it be about nature, whether it just be just 5 minutes where all you're doing is denying the weight of the world, allowing it to go on without you. Allow for God's still small voice. Embrace even the silence as God speaking to you, naming to you. Come, find a quiet center sometime this week. Grace and peace to you.